Hi, my name's Natalie Griffith, and I'm the CEO and founder of Identity Spark, which is a branding, marketing, and communications agency designed to support games developers, publishers, and related technology companies. It's been around for nearly 7 years now, but I've been in the industry myself for nearly 30 years. So I like to think that I've got a reasonable handle on what are the important things that you need to know as a startup or scale-up developer, and the kind of things that you need to sort of pull out of this big mass of information around marketing to actually make it successful for you. And the biggest problem when you start trying to get a grip on your own marketing, you know it's important to do, most of you do, but then you start digging into it and it's just this wash of this massive wall of buzzwords. And it can be really difficult and actually quite intimidating to work out what all these things mean, whether they mean anything to you, whether they're even relevant for what it is that you're trying to do. Well, the good thing to know is that most of this is nonsense. We're a terrible, terrible sector for coming up with new acronyms and buzzwords and ways to identify the latest viral sensation that is bound to make you a success. It all comes down, though, to some basic principles of marketing and some basic principles of the things you need to care about in terms of getting your message across there. So that's hopefully what we're going to do today. But maybe we need to take a quick step back. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you kind of know that why you should care about this stuff, but maybe you're not sure. And the number one reason really is that there is no field of dreams. You can't build a company or build a game and just expect people to come and flock to it just by the fact that it exists. You have to make more effort than that. You have to go out there and meet people where they are, whether that's virtually or in real life. And you've got to get your message out there. You can't rely on people to just find you in a vacuum. But how do you work out what is right for you? How do you pull the little buzzwords out of that massive wall of buzzwords and work out which things are going to be important and what suits your business and what you're trying to achieve? Well, as I said, this is what we're going to do in the presentation today. I've taken 6 of the main buzzwords, the main areas that I think you should all be focusing on, whether that's building your business or building a game franchise or whatever it is that you're doing to promote yourselves and market yourselves and raise your profile. So the first one to look at is your brand. That's where it always has to start. And the really important thing with brand is that it's more than just the logo. Your visual identity is important, obviously, and that's something you're going to put some time and effort into, hopefully. But almost more important than that is actually identifying your values. And what do I mean by that? So I mean taking the time to think about the things that you care about, why you're doing what you're doing. Your business didn't just come into existence by accident, it started for a reason. So the main approach that I'd like to advise people to do is take a principle called the Golden Circle, which was created by a British-American marketing guru called Simon Sinek. And he works on the principle that most companies, when they actually start thinking about their values or their brand identity and their positioning, is they think about what it is that they're making, what the end product is. They might then think about how they go about doing it, but rarely do they actually think about why they're doing it. So his principle is that you start from the middle of that circle. So you start with the why in the middle, then you expand to the how, and then you expand to the what. By doing that, you're asking yourself the questions right at the beginning. The why question is all about what motivates you, what drives you, what impact do you want to have, why do you get up in the morning? It's not, the why can't be just make money, that's a commercial outcome from it. But the why is very much about what drives you and what inside it is that you're passionate about. If you identify that and communicate that through all your values, then everything else should follow along behind. So the how is then the more sort of the cerebral side of things, thinking about the practical, logistical ways of you implementing your vision and your passion. And the what, only at that point do you then think about that end product and the outcome that you're getting from everything that you're doing. So the why, the how, and the what, I often translate into heart, head, hands. So what is it in your heart? What is it that really, really pushes you to achieve what you want to achieve? The head, how do you make that happen? What are the practical logistics? And the hands, what are you making at the end of the day? What is the end output? From all of those things, you can then bring together your brand values and your brand positioning, and the rest of your marketing and communication plans should all stem from that. So the second thing is actually coming up with a strategy. When you're looking at coming up with an overall plan for your marketing, you do need to have a strategy. You do need to have a plan. Think of it as like a design document for your marketing. You wouldn't, or you shouldn't probably, just leap straight into making a game without having some sense of where it's going and what you're trying to achieve. It's exactly the same with a marketing strategy. You've got to think about goal setting. You've got to think about what success means to you, not what other people define as success for your business or your game. What are the success criteria that matter to you? That's where you need to start from. And then you set goals to try and achieve those success criteria. As you're going along and as you're setting up this strategy, you don't want to ignore the data either. There's plenty of ways that you can actually gather information and gather data together from your social channels, and even anecdotal data with the ways that you're approaching your business development process and that kind of thing. So make sure that you're benchmarking at the beginning what metrics you're going to use to see whether this is a success afterwards. And then make sure you iterate while you're doing it. You do this in game development too, right? You don't just kind of make one thing, push it out there and hope for the best. You constantly change. You're constantly evolving. You're experimenting and trying new things, seeing what works, doing more of that and doing less of the stuff that doesn't work. It's exactly the same in marketing. The other thing that's important when you're putting your strategy together is actually think about what you can actually do. And by that I mean the skill set that you have in-house. Does anybody have any experience with marketing in any form before? Do you know somebody that you could hire or bring in or recruit as a consultant? Whatever it is, don't create a strategy without having the knowledge that you have the skills in order to implement it all. There is no point creating some amazing Olympic standard gold level strategy for your marketing if actually you've no idea how you're going to pull it off. That doesn't achieve anything. So once you've got that strategy together, one of the main things you want to think about these days is content. So content marketing is a big deal. It always used to be very much kind of based on relying on other people talking about you, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in terms of traditional PR coming up. But the idea with content marketing is that you're creating content yourself that has value to the people that are following your channels and has value to the people that are interested in you, but is also getting your message out there as well. So obviously that is a little bit more work and a little bit more effort than some other approaches. So why would you want to do that? Well, the main thing is that it controls your message. You're the one explaining what it is that you're doing, why. You're the one getting that message across, and you're talking to people about the things that you're passionate about. And that's where the brand values come in, and the why in the middle of that golden circle comes in. You can talk really clearly about what it is that you're passionate about, why other people should care, and why they should be interested in following you. The other important thing is this shouldn't just be a broadcast sales exercise. Your brand values should inform the way that you talk to people and the things you choose to talk about, rather than announcing and broadcasting your brand values. So that's a really important thing to bear in mind. In terms of getting your content out there, give people what they want. As we said, there is no field of dreams. You can't just create some amazing blog space or a website or a Facebook page or a YouTube channel and then expect people to flock. You have to give them what they want, where they're finding their information. So if the kind of people that you're looking to attract, be they investors, or publishing partners, or players, recruits, whatever the goal is for raising your profile, you need to work out where they find their information and then give them the kind of content that they like to consume on those platforms and on those channels. By adapting and sharing your passions in that way, they are then getting to know you, getting to know your brand and what you stand for, and they're much more likely to follow you on the journey. So an important part of that is thought leadership as well. So this idea that there is no reason why, no matter how experienced or inexperienced you are, you can't be somebody that has strong opinions on something and a strong sense of perhaps where the trends are going in your part of the marketplace, or where you think game development is going in years to come. Get yourself out there having opinions, commenting on things, start predicting and talking about the trends and things that are coming along. All of that stuff goes to show other people that you have some credibility and that you have strongly held beliefs and ideas and that you know what you're talking about. And that in turn will again get people to follow you and get them to sort of be interested in what it is that you have to say. So the really important, or two really important things for producing content, it's about being realistic and efficient, and it's about creating an ongoing pipeline. So you can very easily suck up endless hours creating content, whether that's videos, it's blogs, it's screenshots, whatever it is. So you've got to be efficient with it. Make sure that you're putting time aside to do it, but it shouldn't take over the amount of time that you're spending on other things. A lot of people seem to see marketing and creating marketing assets as a kind of nice to have if we've got the time. You absolutely need to take it more seriously than that. But likewise, especially when you're a small studio, it's really, really important to make sure that you're being efficient with your time as well. One of the challenges that I quite often throw at particularly small indie developers is to say to them that any piece of content they create for any purpose, I challenge them to make 3 uses out of that at least. So, for instance, don't spend like a whole afternoon or several days creating an incredible bit of virtual box art and then you use it once for a blog or you use it for your store page and nowhere else. Everything you do can be repurposed in some way, shape or form. Whether that's creating some fun content that goes on social media, whether it's illustrating a blog, whether it's giving an example of a particular art style you've used, whatever it is, there are bound to be multiple ways that you can use whatever it is that you create. So try and think of that reusability so that you get the maximum use out of any time you put into creating things. And the other thing is to have this ongoing pipeline. And by that I mean you should always aim to have at least 1 to 2 weeks, preferably 2 weeks, of content in the bank at any given moment. Because if that's the case, then if something unexpected comes along, or for instance everybody suddenly has to transition to working from home over the space of a couple of days, you know that you've got stuff in the bag and you can keep pushing things out and you can keep the interest happening in your channels. Likewise, it gives you the opportunity to suddenly pivot and take advantage of something else that's happening. If you're spending all your time creating content that you need for the next day, then it's going to be difficult to slot in creating something new if there's an opportunity there that you can jump on. Either way, keep that pipeline going, keep an efficient way of creating everything, and you'll end up with some really, really compelling content that people are going to want to see. So the fourth one is social media. Excuse me. As we've said already, you need to work out where your followers are. Don't create a Twitter feed and expect them all to come to you if actually all the people that you want to talk to are mostly hanging out on Discord. Think about all of the different channels and the different social media platforms that you can use. And again, as we said before, your skills here should be more, and your experience should be more important than jumping on the trends. There is no point jumping on the latest social media sensation if none of you have got a sense of how to make the most of it, or it's not where any of your followers are likely to be. Make sure that you're getting people that understand each of the channels and how they work and how people consume information and content on them, and you're getting those people to be controlling or preferably leading running each of those things. One of the things that is really, really important is understanding the difference between the channels. Don't be lazy with the content that you put out. You've got to differentiate it for different channels. Now, that doesn't mean that you can only talk about one type of thing in one place. You can talk about the same thing in multiple places, but you need to talk about it in slightly different ways depending on how people consume things on those channels. So please don't be that person that just hooks up Hootsuite or TweetDeck or whatever to automatically pump everything you push out straight onto Facebook, straight onto Twitter, straight onto LinkedIn, so that everybody that's following you sees the same thing in every place. People use Facebook in different ways to how they use Twitter, in different ways to how they use LinkedIn, in different ways to how they use Instagram. They expect to see different types of content on there. So even if there's one message that you want to get across on all of those channels, and there's a valid reason for doing that, then you need to present it in a different way. So sometimes that might be just a simple change in the copy. Sometimes it might be visuals. Maybe on Twitter you've created a GIF to support a bit of information you wanted to put out. Maybe on Instagram you wanted to do an Instagram story. Maybe on Facebook it was better to do a quick live broadcast. Either way, like we said before, you can reuse those assets and you can have different purposes for the things that you create, and you're differentiating things on each channel so people can choose to follow which channel best suits the kind of information they want to see. So thinking about the kind of skills idea as well, your social media isn't just for the intern. It's very easy, if you haven't got much experience in this stuff, to find an amazing, sparky new marketing graduate, get them in for an internship and get them to run the social media. Now, if you've got a really well thought through strategy and a clear content plan, then there's absolutely no reason why a really smart intern can't actually execute a lot of that stuff. But one of the most important things is actually listening more than you talk on social media. I always advise people, particularly on Twitter, but this applies on most channels, to split your content into thirds. So only a third of it should be broadcast. So in other words, pushing out the content that you've agreed and that you've created. Another third of it should be having conversations with people, asking questions, answering questions, getting into debates, talking about trends, showing that you have an opinion, that you have an understanding of the sector that you're in. And the final third should be amplifying other people. So making sensible judgments as to the things that you care about and that you therefore want to be seen to care about, so that that shows that your values off to your potential followers as well. So for instance, if you support a particular charity, or you're keen to encourage young people into careers in STEM subjects, for instance, then you're going to be finding, amplifying and retweeting and resharing things that support that charity or STEM activities or education conferences, for instance. So with that in mind, that only a third of your content is pushing out the content that you've created for yourself, that broadcast, that's why it's important that it's not just the junior member of staff that handles your social media feeds. Because a junior member of staff who isn't as embedded in the company's culture, the company's business goals, the overall aims and those core values at the heart of it, they are going to be less well armed to decide what's appropriate stuff to be sharing and amplifying, and much less well armed to be able to get into those smart conversations and debates and trend discussions online as well. And you can't risk having multiple different tones of voice on your social feeds, because you have to have that authenticity so it doesn't just look like you've got a PR doing it for you. So think really carefully about how you attribute your work. Don't downgrade the importance of the 2/3 of the content that you have to put out on social media. And also, once again, don't ignore the data. There's a lot of very impressive and very expensive social media channel analytics tools that you can dig into all of the effectiveness of everything. But actually the built-in stuff is pretty useful too. Twitter analytics, Facebook insights, the built-in analytics on LinkedIn, to a degree on Instagram, but also Google Analytics on your website. All of that stuff has really useful information and insights that you can look at and monitor over time. Check that back to the benchmarking you did at the beginning on your strategy and the goals that you set there for what you were looking to achieve, and make sure the stuff that you're experimenting with is working and that the right kind of people are looking at it and, most importantly, engaging with it. Social media is always about quality engagement and people that care about what you're doing much more than it is just about numbers. And if you're trying to do this for a bigger company and you're having to kind of report up to the big cheeses at the top of the company and all they want to care about is numbers, then show those numbers and that growth, but make sure that every time you're presenting up, you're also showing them the context of quality engagement and when people cared more about what you did. So you're starting to train them that is more important. So the fifth point then is PR. So public relations, which was actually never really talking straight to the press. It's always straight to the public. It's actually press relations. It's about talking to the media and making sure that you get the right people on board to spread your message for you. Now, what's really, really important with PR is research. Pretty much every games journalist and technology journalist is absolutely swamped with inquiries. Their inbox will be overflowing all the time, and the last thing they want is to get emails in that overflowing inbox that are for things that they're just never going to care about. So if you're promoting your new puzzle game, don't send it to a website or a journalist that only ever does RPGs on PC. It seems an obvious thing, but you'd be surprised at the number of people who've kind of somehow come across a GDC mailing list and then decided to send their press release for their game launch out to the world and his wife on that. It is worth doing that research and targeting really, really carefully, because you are much more likely to pop to the top of that journalist's inbox and actually get them to pay attention to it. The other thing is that this is quite an incestuous industry. Journalists move around a lot. They often move in and out of PR and journalism as well, and they may well end up on a different site or writing about a different kind of thing in 6 months' time. And if they remember you as the person that just sent them random mail merged emails that were the same as everybody and it wasn't relevant to them, that when they do get to a place where they might be relevant to you, they've actually already got you marked in this box of being a bit of a time waster. So that research and careful targeting is really, really important. The other important thing we're thinking about, like press coverage, is you may not actually need it. There's so many ways of reaching people now, and this is why the content marketing side of social media is really important as well. In a lot of cases, particularly if you're in a large scale sort of more core game or AAA kind of scenario, then those big games, specialist game sites are still super important, and review scores are still super important. But an awful lot of content that we create these days, particularly indie developers, and particularly those that are more as a game as a service, and so you've got the ongoing community management, which we'll talk about in a minute, then the press coverage is much less important. So think carefully about what you do need and what you don't, and don't think that you have to try and get the front cover of Edge in order to prove that you've been successful in your promotion. It may not be the right thing for you. The other important thing that actually helps towards the targeting and the research is actually building those relationships. So it's difficult when we're all locked down to go to any. There's obviously no real life events happening, but they're brilliant places to connect with people and start to get to know people when we are able to go back out again. But in the meantime, you can build those relationships online as well, and you should continue to do that even when our events calendar returns to normal. And it's easy to do that on Twitter and other social platforms. Just getting used to sort of getting started in those conversations with journalists, seeing what it is they're interested in, getting into chats about, it might be random stuff, it might be some random TV series that they're watching that you also enjoy, and you get chatting about it. Building relationships is exactly the same online or in any business setting as it is in the real world. You don't kind of get introduced to somebody for the first time and then suddenly start telling them about your amazing game idea. It's a little bit more nuanced and organic than that. So don't get freaked out by this idea of trying to make those commercial relationships happen. Also, once you have built those relationships up over time, you're able to show people as you're working on things, get them interested in the story as it goes along. But also when it comes to coming back to them and saying, oh, that thing I've been telling you about, we're about to release it now, would you like a code? Make it really easy for them to cover your game. Again, they've got overflowing inboxes. They don't want to have to dig down and go off and do a load of research and a load of Googling to get all the information they need to cover your game, even if they're really interested in it. Make sure that email, if you're looking, for instance, for review coverage for a game, make sure that email includes a clear link to the trailer, a link to a press kit, which should include screenshots and logos and general game information. A code included in the email and an idea of where it is that they redeem that. Make everything there really easy for them. They're not lazy, but they're really, really busy. So anything you can do that makes their life that bit easier and that bit quicker will make it much more likely that you will get the coverage that you want. And also I've put in the end there about including influencers. Now this could be a whole talk or a whole seminar day on its own, but I tend to include working with influencers, so YouTubers and streamers, as part of, think about it in the same mindset as PR. Although it's a different kind of chunk of content, a slightly different way of working, that approach to building relationships, courting people, finding out what they're interested in, what kind of things they want to put on their channel is very, very similar to that traditional sort of PR relationship building. So think about it in that frame of mind, particularly if you're not someone that has the budget to do high value paid influencer marketing campaigns as well. So make sure you don't forget about that. Often getting a smaller but very dedicated streamer or YouTuber to cover your game can be worth way more than spending money or somehow getting yourself onto a really massive channel where only a small niche of their viewers are actually going to care about your game. Think about where you're actually going to have the biggest impact. If you're making a digital version of a tabletop game, for instance, you're going to have much more value getting a few YouTubers who specialise in covering tabletop games to look at your game than you are giving it to like PewDiePie or someone. So just think about where you're going to have the most value and where people are most likely to be interested in the kind of thing that you're putting out there. So I touched a minute ago about community management. Community is big important of the 6 buzzwords these days. And also think about this as not just being gamers. So yes, if you're doing a game as a service, you're doing something through early access, or you've got an open beta on your own platform, whatever it is that you're doing, building that community of gamers is super important and bringing them with you on the journey. But so is thinking about your broader business community as well. If you're trying to raise the profile of your company or your studio, then your community is going to include maybe students as potential recruits. It's perhaps going to include the investment community if you're looking to get funding at some point. It might also include potential publishing partners. So think about the community around your game and your studio as anybody that you want to have a vested interest in your success and in where you're going. So as with social media, listen more than you talk, particularly in a sort of traditional gamers community management setting. The beauty of being able to bring a community along with you and get their feedback early on something is that you can listen to what it is they're saying. There's no point doing it otherwise if you're just going to steamroll through and expect them to take everything that you're offering and think it's marvellous. The whole point is to learn from people. So be open, be honest, make sure you're taking their ideas on board, even if you're not able to implement them. At least communicate as to why you can't or you can't do them yet. And then also empower them to help. Getting a lot of people engaged in your game or your studio quite early on can be incredibly powerful, and you know that you've got a community that's working well when somebody new comes into it and either criticises something or asks a question something they don't understand. You know you're working well when 2 or 3 of the existing community members have already gone on, replied, sent useful links and helped that person out before you've even got your boots on. So that's a really, really important thing to be able to do, is to trust people and empower them to help and evangelise on your behalf, because the ones that are early adopters on that, they want to do that. They want to see you successful and they want to help. But the tail can't wag the dog. You're still the ones in control. You still get to decide the tone of your community, what things are talked about, the culture of how people support each other. So that's an important thing to remember too. And also most importantly is be patient when you're building a community. You can't fast track this in a way that will be useful to you. Even if you've got a ton of money to throw at acquiring users to follow you, they are not going to stick around if they haven't come across you organically, care about what you're doing and want to stick around and see you be successful. So you've got to build in time. If your business plan and your launch plan is reliant on building up a community, then you have to make sure you allow time to build that community up effectively. So there are kind of the six buzzwords, the 6 areas that I think you need to be asking yourself questions and thinking about before you do any kind of marketing work for yourself, but also before you try and find other people to help you with your marketing work, whether that's consultants and agencies like myself, whether that's hiring somebody, whether that's partnering somebody and bringing them into the team as a founder. Whatever it is, you need to be asking yourself questions around those 6 areas to make sure that you've got everything ready and in place. So obviously this is a very short amount of time in order to get across a lot of information, so it's clearly very, very high level. So if you're still confused, that's okay. There's a lot of stuff to learn and I've got through a lot of stuff quite quickly. I have a plan to do a 2-day marketing workshop via Ukie, which unfortunately we've had to postpone because of the current lockdown. But at some point, once things open up again, then keep an eye out on Ukie's social media channels for news about that. And that will be a 2-day course that actually expands these 6 topics into workshops and practical advice and experiments and experience to get you kind of more up to speed with that. In the meantime though, my email address is on the screen. Please drop me a line or find me on Twitter, and I will do what I can to help. You can do this. You will be able to put your own marketing plans together and you will be able to be successful. Thanks very much for listening.